I really don't know how anyone can take me serious right now, but there it is. We're environmentally friendly. We repurpose and reuse things. Woo. Woo. Woo.
Let's stir it up. I'm going with Northern Iowa. I'm looking for the Bison to cover the Dogs.
Where's the bell? I think I'm a bad mix between Tom Landry and Ric Flair right now. I'm kind of a prop mess.
I can't even look at you. I'm going to have to look this way, actually, to talk to you.
This is going to be a total surprise for me. Like you, the fans, I'm going to see this when this video blog runs, so I hope it's good.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome inside the Unidome. It's the Media Blog pregame show from Cedar Falls, Iowa's #1 ranked North Dakota State gets set to take on Northern Iowa. Along with the one and only Big E, Eric Peterson, and Jeff Kolpack, I'm Dom Izzo. Gentlemen, we get set for maybe the game of the year in the Missouri Valley Conference. Jeff, I feel like I say that every time that the Bison and the Panthers hook up, but maybe none more so than today. NDSU, of course, takes its 33-game winning streak into Cedar Falls. The Panthers have been playing better football as of late. They won 3 of 4, including knocking off unbeaten Illinois State in this building a week ago.
I thought that was a big win for them. I think it saved their season, so to speak. I think they have a new focus, too, because if you lose to Illinois State, which is unbeaten, it just puts you farther down the standings, and it makes that tougher of a road to get back. I think this game should have a trophy of some sort. Last week was the marker, right? So everybody after the game went crazy for the marker. I think this game is a little higher in intensity.
Oh, yeah.
It needs something.
Yeah, we'll talk about the history of this rivalry in the Division I era later as the show goes on. Big E, I can just go back to last year's game, and a lot of people will say, well, Kansas State was the hardest game NDSU had all season. I disagree. I thought it was Northern Iowa just because they put themselves in a 13-0 hole and a 23-10 hole before they came back and won the game 24-23.
Well, I'm just happy I have my own mic.
You do have your own mic.
I'm really moving up the ranks. I think they're similar, though, because at Kansas State, I did feel like NDSU was in trouble, and they're down 21-7 in the third quarter. Granted, they went to the fourth quarter down 13 against UNI, but that was a home game. So not that you expect them to come back, but you felt they maybe would have a little better chance with the home team on their, the home crowd on their side. But you and I played them as well as anybody did last year. David Johnson gave them some trouble, had a big run which you don't see very often against the Bison, that 85-yard touchdown run. The game really changed momentum-wise when he went down with that hip pointer. So if he can stay healthy all day today, UNI is going to be in this thing.
I also thought the game changed when Jake Farley went down, too. So you had your best defender, I think, your middle linebacker, your quarterback on defense. I think when he went down, that really changed UNI's season, too.
We've got a loaded show for you. Scott Kleiman's going to join us. So that last name sounds familiar. It should. That's the head coach's brother. He's going to give us the inside info on what's going on with the family this week. Obviously, it's a massive homecoming for Chris Kleiman, coming back to the school that he graduated from, that he played at. Obviously, some storylines there with the head coach, Mark Farley. We got a little inside dish on our radio show with UNI athletic director Troy Dannon about how all that went down. We'll ask Scott about that. Also, Jim Sullivan will join us. He covers UNI football for the Waterloo Cedar Falls Courier. He said, Jeff, this is the biggest game in the history of this building.
And he's been covering football longer than I have, and that's saying something. This building is like 40 years old.
Yes.
It's been around a while, and to say that this is one of the biggest games ever, well, I guess it's one of the biggest games ever. Sully would know.
We go back to 2009. A lot of people will point that's where the history of this real rivalry took off, and obviously that was the game that UNI won in Fargo where Pat Paschal punched a UNI player. There was a brawl on the sideline. And after that, I don't know if it really ramped up. I go back to the game here in 2010 where NDSU was sacked 10 times, negative 40 rushing yards. We talked about in the postgame. I'll never forget that day. Billy Turner got inserted into the lineup. And, of course, NDSU went on and they started this run. But now they've won the last 3 times against Northern Iowa, Jeff. But I look at the last 3 matchups. The Panthers have committed 7 turnovers in the last 3 games against NDSU. The Bison only had 3 in the last 3 meetings against UNI.
Of course, in big games, turnovers are always going to be a big factor. I go back to the 2010 game. Remember, that was coming off a 6-3 win at Kansas. Yeah. That was a big FBS win at the time. Now I guess it became commonplace, but they came in here and just got manhandled by Northern Iowa, and they blew up the offensive line after that. We're talking about NDSU. Scott Fuchs, they went back to the drawing board. They switched positions. They put Billy Turner like
came
you said.
in. Yep.
And I think that was really the big factor in NDSU eventually making the playoffs.
Big E, Northern Iowa's season could have gone off the rails right at the start. They played 2 FBS teams. They lost to both of them. Granted, they were close. They nearly beat Hawaii, and they lost to Iowa to start the season. But as I mentioned right up the top, they won 3 of their last 4. But we don't really know what's going on at quarterback with this team.
Well, you talk about playing 2 FBS teams. That puts so much pressure on you as a football team.
No doubt.
Because granted, you can still say they're FBS losses, but when people look at your record, they see those 2 losses. Yeah. So, if you don't win one of them, it already puts you behind the 8 ball as far as winning your other games. But yeah, unsettled at quarterback. Who knows what they're going to do today? Jeff, when we're coming in, says Sawyer Cole-Morgan, he expects to see him because he thinks UNI is going to need more of a passing presence to beat NDSU. Breon Carnes is kind of the running guy. So you're going to have to be multi-dimensional because I don't think you can line it up and just try to run the ball to NDSU all game long.
Why do you say Cole-Morgan?
Well, to beat NDSU, I think you have to have a multi-dimension attack. You look at Breon Carnes. He's a running quarterback, essentially. Last week, he was 10 of 30 passing. He completes 45% of his passes on the year. I think against NDSU's defense, which if you get one-dimensional on NDSU's defense, it's a tough deal. Yeah. And that's just proven over the last 3, 4, almost 5 years, actually. I'll go back to the 3-8 season, and still, if you got a one-dimensional team, I think you're an easier attack. I think you got to see a passing quarterback against this defense.
Northern Iowa's losses, Jeff, they've been close all season long. They lost by 8 at Iowa. They lost by 3 at Hawaii. They lost by 1 to Indiana State. And then they lost, of course, by 3 to South Dakota State. So they've not been blown out in any game this season. But those 2 losses to 2 Valley teams that are currently ahead of them, South Dakota State actually, Northern Iowa is ahead of. But they obviously have to, I think they have to win out and then hope that Indiana State beats South Dakota State.
Well, I think if they win out, they're in. That's a slam dunk. Yeah. There's no doubt about it. Even with 4 losses.
And you beat Illinois State and NDSU were part of that process.
And you beat 2 unbeaten teams, and you beat them late in the year, too. I watched that Northern Iowa-Hawaii game. Northern Iowa's got some athleticism. Yeah. They always have, and they probably always will. They recruit that way. And that's why special teams, and maybe we'll get into it later, special teams will be a big factor because the Panthers, I think more so, and Illinois State found this out last week, has better athletes on special teams than almost everybody else.
A real quick word before we get to our guests here. David Johnson, Big E, and Kolpack and I were debating this on my radio show earlier in the week between him and John Crockett, who's better. Johnson has put up monster numbers, and he's done it against everybody. Zach Zenner, I made this argument, has done it against everybody but NDSU. Johnson had an 85-yard touchdown run at the Fargo Dome last year, and Kolpack brought it up right at the start of the show. He got hurt in the 3rd quarter. Who knows what would have happened if he would have stayed in the game last year? He's a terrific running back. I
think one of the reasons why those 2 are hard to compare is Crockett's just in a different system. NDSU likes splitting their backs. He split carries with Samuel Jury, which has benefited him in staying healthy. When you ride a guy like David Johnson and Zach Zenner, I mean, it's amazing how healthy Zach Zenner's played been throughout his career, getting that many carries. But NDSU's system of playing 2 backs, you don't put up the monster numbers. Not that John Crockett's numbers are bad, but then again, the flip side is you stay healthier as the season moves along.
Now, last time we were here 2 years ago, Jeffrey, in this very spot, Big E produced the Victory Mints, the NDSU Victory Mints. I don't know if they're coming back out for our prediction segment at the end of today's show.
You'll have to wait and see, Dom. You'll have to wait and see.
I can't wait to find out. Big E will rejoin us later on in today's show, of course, for his prediction segment at the back end. We mentioned the quarterback's shuffle in this case, and Mark Farley went to Breon Carnes, and we talked about it. We talked to Jim Sullivan before the season even started. He was curious about, we thought it was a slam dunk at Sawyer Cole-Morgan, and he brought up that Carnes would play, and he was dead on about that.
Well, Bison fans will remember Sawyer Cole-Morgan from 2 years ago. He was a freshman of the year in the Missouri Valley and runner-up for the FCS Best Freshman, the Jerry Rice Award. So you thought this was a guy for 4 years, would have been a staple and have been almost one of those record-setting type of guys. I think injuries may have played a part in the last couple of years.
The last time Northern Iowa beat NDSU, Jeff, they had a running quarterback. That was Terrell Rennie. And he had a bit of an arm, not a great one, but he was multifaceted out of the pocket, and that was really hard. NDSU was not prepared for him in 2010.
No, and that was a game, like I said, after the Kansas game, Northern Iowa hadn't played yet.
No,
so NDSU didn't know what they were going to get.
Well, as we roll along here on our Media Blog pregame show, we're live on WDAY's Extra and WDAY.com. We're really pleased to be joined by our first guest today who has, I would think, Jeff, a little bit of an inside knowledge of what's going on with the Kleiman family. And that's Scott Kleiman, the head coach, Chris Kleiman's brother. First off, thanks for giving us a few minutes and joining us today. What has this week been like? You're Iowa guys, Iowa natives. What has this been building up for today?
Dom, it's been an interesting week, needless to say. Having roots here, born and raised, both Chris and I, we have a sister in between. Mom and Dad live in Waterloo.
Yeah.
I live a backyard away from the head football coach at Northern Iowa. So it's certainly an interesting dynamic. We're all in with dark green and gold, but the buzz and the anticipation of a homecoming, if you will, certainly has an interesting dynamic, and one that I know Chris is really looking forward to, mainly to get the chance to see some friends and family. At the end of the day, it's a business trip. We've got a game to play, and I say we because I'm all in with Bison, and but it's been fun. We've seen a lot of people in the last 2 days that have come back from different places. That our old high school coach is going to be in attendance tonight, and it's going to be a lot of fun with people that we haven't seen for a while.
You've been talking to Chris all week. What do you think's going through his mind? Is he a type of guy who's going to let you know exactly, or is he being more coy about it?
Here,
Well, Jeff, he'll probably be a little more candid with me, and quite frankly, his attitude has been. This is while it's an important game, I'm coming back home. At the end of the day, it's a league game. It's an important league game, and we don't want to lose sight that we've got a couple of more dates after this one. And he's been very, I think, grounded relative to the perspective, and we don't want to put too much emphasis on one game, but I think he realizes that, hey, we want to win each conference game. This is a big one, but we're not going to overhype it and overemphasize it.
Take me back to the offseason, Scott, after 2010, when Chris was talking about leaving UNI and maybe going to Fargo and joining Craig Bohl's staff. What do you remember the conversations were like? Was it hesitancy, or was he ready? I'm ready for the next challenge.
Well, I think it's twofold. When you have a family and young kids and trying to uproot that scenario and that infrastructure, it becomes a little more challenging. But when you looked at it, and he and I had a lot of conversations, I know Dad and he had a lot of conversations, you look at the type of program that North Dakota State had and has, and at the end of the day, you look at it back and say, this place knows exactly what they're doing, and Craig's a class guy and embraced a new attitude and a new thought from a kid coming from really a rival in the league. So I think it was a great opportunity and a great balance. I don't know that he was ready to jump per se, but when an opportunity like North Dakota State comes, who would be you'd be foolish not to.
Well, I think you're much better looking than your brother too. I don't know why I say that, but for some reason,
that's the general consensus. Well. Jeff, thank you for mentioning that.
Was he always going to be a coach growing up?
It's so funny, and we shared a room on West 6th Street in Waterloo, and bunk beds and whatnot, and he had coaching books out. I mean, he had the stuff Lombardi would write, and I mean, seriously, and it's he'd write his papers if they were a specific topic, he would somehow twist that back to a football endeavor, and it was really, you could see it, absolutely.
Yeah.
Now you live here. You get to see Northern Iowa. I know you pay attention to NDSU now, but from afar, looking at the Panther program, and obviously they've had, Jeff, we've detailed some financial straits that they've got to play two FBS teams almost routinely now to make budget. What have you seen over the last couple of years? Because this obviously, they were the FCS kings for a while. Granted, I know they didn't have the titles like NDSU is currently, but they've kind of fallen on hard times. They haven't made the playoffs in the last 3 years.
Yeah, and Dom, it's hard to say why that's happened. I think there's a couple of reasons. Certainly, it becomes a financial constraint. You have Iowa State in this particular state. You have the University of Iowa. Yeah. And when you're a directional of a state, I think it becomes a little more financial challenging. But at the same time, I think other programs in our league have become really the envy, North Dakota State being one, but we've got Illinois State on a rise. You've got South Dakota State, whom you wouldn't think from the demographics that Brookings in that market would be a place that would have and strive to do some great things. But I think the dynamic has changed, and the other programs, namely ours, NDSU, has really embraced, well, this is who we are, this is what we're going. We want to be a Division I program. We're going to do what's necessary to get there.
Right. You've seen a lot of games in here. You've been to the Fargo Dome now. Compare the two experiences.
Not even close. And I'll try to be unbiased.
Yes.
Not even close.
Really?
It's not even close. The Fargo Dome is an atmosphere and a fan base that's unlike any other match anywhere I've seen. Not even close.
Hard to argue that from what we've seen over the last couple of years. I remember that 2011 game in Fargo, and we detailed this on the radio show earlier today, that became the new norm of how loud it was, that game against Northern Iowa. And I remember how Brock Jensen was unbelievable in that game. He was 22 of 25. He couldn't miss that day. DJ McNorton was big, and that kind of changed the tide. The recruiting wars is what Kolpack has been hitting on all week, and that's really, I think, and I couldn't agree more with how things have changed. NDSU has dipped its toe a little bit into Iowa. What have you seen about the Bison getting into this state and trying to get more players out of here?
Well, I think if there's a quality kid that would be a fit, and Chris and I have talked about this, it's a fit. There's probably some terrific athletes that end up at Iowa State that could be at our place, but they may not be a fit. So I think at the end of the day, if we have a fit, whether it's Iowa, Missouri, Kansas, Minnesota, that's the big thing. I don't know that there's a emphasis on trying to find an Iowa kid that's would be a fit for us. But let's we've got Lance Dunn from Waterloo West.
Yes,
terrific fit. I mean, a terrific, great young kid. Will be a dynamite player for us. He was a great fit. Happened to be from Waterloo, Iowa.
Yeah. Did you happen to drive by and leave a couple of Bison flyers by chance at his house?
Got to have some yard signs.
Yeah. Before we let you go, I know your mom and dad are going to be there. Is there anybody wearing any hint of purple today, or is it all green and gold today?
There's not a drop of purple. It won't be a drop of purple. We're all in.
That's family for you.
No doubt. We really appreciate you giving us a few minutes. Enjoy
absolutely.
the game
Thanks,
today.
guys.
I know this will be good stuff.
Thanks, guys.
Scott Kleiman, Chris Kleiman's brother, giving us a few minutes here on our Media Blog pregame show. It's a really interesting look inside the dynamic of this, and it's got to be a wild. It's going to be a wild few hours for their family tonight. It has to be. I'm curious. I hope the UNI fan base is respectful to them tonight.
Well, I would think so.
Yeah.
You don't grow up in a community, live here this long, for it not to be. It's like you said, though. You go where the family is, and when Chris got that head position, the whole family was up there for announcement. They drove.
They did.
6 hours and 15 minutes for a 15-minute press conference, essentially.
Well, I know the handsome factor of the pregame show is going off the radar now as we welcome in Jim Sullivan from the Waterloo Cedar Falls Courier. It's good to see you, my friend. The last time I saw Jim, he's going to give me crap about this. He was running around Target Field's press box looking for a press pass. I'm glad you're much more restrained now.
Yes, Dom didn't see me at my best, and he handled it like a pro. Me, on the other hand, not so much. And the postscript to that whole story is that I was supposed to get a clubhouse pass, didn't get it. Finally, at 10 minutes to 7, Tyler Mason of the Twins arranged for me to get one. So I get the press pass, go down to the clubhouse, and every time I walked into the American League clubhouse, Derek Jeter was coming out, Glenn Perkins was coming out, so I had no reason to go in there anyway.
Well, you wrote earlier this week, you think this is the biggest game in the history of this building. Tell us why.
Well, it has a lot to do with the opponent. North Dakota State comes in here with the winning streak, two-time national champion, all of that. And we've had number one teams come in here before, but nobody with those credentials, nobody with that on the line. And if you and I could somehow pull off the upset here, win the game, they make history. Or by the same token, if the streak continues, history continues. And on UNI's side, this is a game most people think they have to have.
Yeah.
If they don't win this one, it's hard to imagine the committee will take them even if they win the next two. Well, they'd be 7-5. They could still finish 5-3 in the league, but you're really, really vulnerable. Not just to people inside the league, but outside. And so it's there's a lot on the line here, and so it should be a lot of fun.
Well, I think they're going to have to use Cole Morgan. That's just I have no inside information on that, but interested to get your take. To beat NDSU, do you just go with Carnes, or do you need your throwing quarterback?
That's a good question. I think, and I'm like,
is he healthy? First of all,
as far as I know, as far as I know, but you know how coaches are with injuries. But my take on that, Jeff, is, and I'm only guessing like you, they'll go as far as they can with Carnes.
Okay.
If he's doing the job and they're ahead or close, they'll stay with him. However, if things start going south, let's say they're down 14 points in the third quarter and he's struggling throwing, he throws a pick, turns the ball over, then I think we'll see Sir Cole Morgan. But it's going to have to be, I think, in a situation that's not favorable for UNI.
I look at all their games they've lost, Jim. They've been close in everything. They're a point away from beating Indiana State. They lost by a field goal to South Dakota State. What has it been? Has it been one play that hasn't gotten them over the hump? And what did they make that play last week against Illinois State?
To a degree, yes. But, yeah, certainly one or two plays or one or two phases of the game have been a problem. Going back to the Indiana State game, what frustrated Mark Farley was the fact they couldn't score in the red zone. Kicked 4 field goals. And they had chances to really put some distance between themselves and Indiana State, especially when they had the win at their back. So it comes to a point in the fourth quarter where Indiana State executes a beautiful trick play, lateral, pass downfield, touchdown. They take the lead, and UNI has to try a 53-yard field goal against the wind to try to win it. That's not good odds. And so it's been stuff like that. Against Illinois State, the special teams were huge, and they were able to overcome some mistakes. Carnes fumbled the first snap he took. So that wasn't the best of starts. And he threw a couple picks in the fourth quarter or the second half, and they still managed to win.
What is it with Indiana State? All the trick plays. They didn't try that in Fargo, but they did it against UNI and against Missouri State last week with the hidden ball trick.
Well, the hidden ball trick on the kickoff was a beauty. Did you see that?
Yes, I did. I saw it.
Unbelievable.
And the interesting thing about that was one guy had a shot at that ball carrier. One guy actually figured it out, and he missed. But the play worked to the extent that everybody else had to be honest. They couldn't go right to the ball carrier. They couldn't gang tackle. So amazing call by the Sycamores.
I thought that was like a 1940s. Why doesn't everybody do that every kickoff now?
I think they used to do it on offense once upon a time. I'm not that old, so I don't remember. But
it's nice having experienced writers on. I love having experienced writers. That's another word for old.
Thank you.
But before the Missouri Valley Conference, there was the Gateway Football Conference. How has it changed, Sully, with South Dakota State, North Dakota State joining the league? Now you have South Dakota.
It's gotten immensely better. I don't think there's any question about that. Eastern Illinois left, and they were a good, solid program. They're regular in the playoffs, but it's still an upgrade having NDSU, SDSU, and South Dakota's had its moments too. There's more teams, and I think from top to bottom, the competition is so much tougher. I think when I first came here, there were maybe 6 teams in the Gateway. And Indiana State wasn't particularly good at that point.
Right.
Southern Illinois wasn't particularly good at that point. Missouri State was. Western Illinois had its moments, but as I said, from top to bottom, it's just this is the toughest it's ever been.
UNI had a free ticket to the playoffs essentially there for a few years.
By and large. Yeah.
But they deserved it because they were really good, but the competition really wasn't there either.
Right. They had to worry about maybe 1 or 2 games a year. Western Illinois, Missouri State, Eastern sometimes.
I look next door over at the McLeod Center, and every Bison fan that'll be here today goes, boy, can't wait for that to happen. And also, they would love to be part of UNI's basketball conference. Do you see that ever down the road, that NDSU and South Dakota State are members of the Missouri Valley, full members?
Sure, why not? I mean, the way things are in college athletics these days, it's impossible to keep up with a lot of the changes. I have no idea who's in the Mountain West.
Right.
Who knows? Tomorrow it could change. So, given the fact that this, there's all this movement going out there, who knows what will happen with some of the Valley members. There's always rumblings about this team leaving, that team leaving. What's Wichita State going to do? So certainly there could be room, or if they decide to expand, there could be room. And I would think that either both schools would be a great addition.
Well, Missouri Valley is a basketball league.
Yes, it is.
Every school, and we've been around the Missouri Valley enough to know, every school has these Taj Mahal-like basketball facilities. The pressure was on for UNI, and the McLeod Center just got built, about 5, 6, 7 years ago?
10 years ago.
10 years ago now? But the heat was on to upgrade there.
Yeah, and what you say is very true. Southern Illinois upgraded. And their facility, their old one, was really interesting. It was an old school barn type thing. That was a home court advantage, and it's been interesting since they opened the new place.
I look at Missouri State, Illinois State. They are fantastic facilities.
And Wichita's as good as it gets.
Really, like the old man of the deal is now Larry Bird.
Indiana State.
Yeah, that's right.
Hey, before we let you go, if UNI loses today, they finish 7-5. How much pressure is there going to be on Mark Farley if they miss the playoffs? Is there any from the administration on him?
I don't think so. I think at this point he's fine. Obviously, no one wants to be in a position where you're out of the playoffs 3 years in a row. Yeah. That hasn't happened here since '97 to 2000 when Mike Dunbar was here. But no, I don't think there's any. There's always going to be disgruntled fans. That's anywhere. But I don't see any pressure on him.
Mike Dunbar didn't have to play 2 FBS in a season.
That's correct too.
But they found ways to lose games they shouldn't have. That's the way it goes.
You got a prediction for us before we let you go?
Well, let me think. I guess I'll have to, because I have to go back to the press box, I'll go UNI by 3, late field goal.
Sully, thanks for doing this. We appreciate
Anytime,
it. Great
guys.
to see you, my friend.
Enjoy the game.
Jim Sullivan from the Waterloo Cedar Falls Courier. He picks UNI. I was close, Kolpack. I really was.
You picked UNI at the beginning of the year.
I did take them at the beginning of the year. How that game unfolded last week, and I think you brought it up in my radio show on Monday, is that
Illinois State gave UNI 6 turnovers, and they still nearly won that football game. That's why I'm concerned about that, because NDSU will never turn the football over 6 times.
Northern Iowa blocked 2 punts.
Yeah.
They kicked 2 kickoffs out of bounds. They gave up a kickoff return for a touchdown. I wonder how Monday practice was at Illinois State.
That's why I got a feeling they might blow the doors out Youngstown today. Big E rejoins us for our favorite part of the show. Let's get into the nitty-gritty of this. You've had a chance to look over this matchup for the entire week. Where do you see as the real key to today's game between this matchup?
I'm wondering if there's any waffles around here, Dom. I mean, you keep on switching your picks.
I haven't switched.
Yes, you did.
I said...
Dom, it's on tape. It's on tape. The beginning of the year... You said they lose at Iowa State or UNI.
I said they would lose to one of the Iowa schools.
They didn't lose at Iowa State, so what's left?
Who do they play, Briar Cliff or what?
Yeah.
Morningside? Can they get a game with Morningside again?
We got a flip-flopper here.
I know.
What were you trying to ask me, Dom?
I was asking you about what you see as a real key to the game.
David Johnson.
Yes.
If NDSU can contain David Johnson, they're going to have a pretty good chance to win this game. If David Johnson gets going, maybe Carnes can have some effectiveness as a play-action passer. But if David Johnson gets shut down and UNI is going to have to drop back and throw the ball, maybe go to Cole Morgan, I think it's going to be a tough day for the Panthers.
I look at Jake Farley back in the middle. He is a fantastic player. He was the signal caller for UNI when he went out of the game last year. I think they dropped off a bit. I watch him. He's probably going to be eyes on number 23 all day in the NDSU backfield.
Right. Northern Iowa may have struggled on offense some this year, but I think their defense is as good as ever. It's going to have to force a couple turnovers today.
You look at the quarterback play, Carson Wentz ran 16 times for 100 yards. He was banged up a little bit. You had the reports, you got phone calls that he was in a boot earlier in the week. Tim Polasek, NDSU's offensive coordinator, told us on our radio show he did all the reps this week and expects to good to go. There's no way I expect he carries 16 times, though, right?
I don't think so, not against this offense. And I think it was important that the offense was able to show that he could run, because now then it's another person they have to
it's another threat.
Count of, right? So maybe you're going to see Crockett a little more this game.
I actually for the wide receivers, Big E. They didn't need it last week. Vraw had a couple catches, but it was a quiet week for them. The Wentz only completed, I think it was 12 passes against the Jags.
I think NDSU is going to need an X-factor touchdown, I'm going to call it. A touchdown from an Andrew Bonnet, a Lucas
one of the Flo brothers.
Yeah, one of the Flo brothers. Somebody other than Vraw and Crockett, the mainstay touchdown guys.
Right.
Maybe even R.J. Yerzandowski needs a big play. I think they'll need a touchdown from somebody else besides their main cogs to be successful today.
Bonnet's home state. He's going out on a limb there to call that one of the Flo brothers for a touchdown.
Well, he's famous for calling. Of course, you haven't been right in 2 years.
No Travis Beck call? You do that every week.
Well, yeah, he's a good player. Eventually, if I called every week, something's going to happen, right?
Normally, that's the case. All right, prediction time here. NDSU taking on Northern Iowa. We should mention all the games in the Valley are going on as we speak, Jeff. South Dakota State and Indiana State are playing right now. Youngstown and Illinois State, I should say the games of consequence. Western Illinois and USD still to come, and also Mo State taking on Southern Illinois. Those other two games, those first two I mentioned, those are huge when we talk about postgame of what's going on in the Valley.
I think they call Survival Saturday in FBS.
They really
I think this is Separation Saturday in the Missouri Valley.
Also should mention Eastern Washington and Montana are playing today in a huge game in the Big Sky. We don't know if Vernon Adams will play in that game, but Montana almost seems like they've got to have it.
He'll play, Dom.
Huh?
He'll play.
Vernon Adams is going to play. You're calling
I don't
that?
know if he can play the whole game or how much they're going to give it a shot. You can't afford any more.
Yeah, when the Grizz come to town, you play.
Well, it's funny because the last 2 weeks we've heard that Montana needs this game or they might be left out of the playoffs. It's unbelievable.
Well, ironically, Northern Arizona is in the driver's seat for the auto bid in the Big Sky. So that would, and if that happens, if they play it out where NAU wins it, somebody's going to be on the odd man out as the out-large, right?
Now, there's a huge game here today. I should mention next year, Eastern Washington comes to this building. I love the scheduling they're doing between the Valley and the Big Sky, scheduling up against some big teams. All right, Big E, the Victory Mint's coming out today. What do you see for today's game?
Well, I'm kind of looking here, seeing the Bryce Pop Merle.
Yes.
I think I saw him circulating around the stadium here.
He's a coach.
You guys badgered me all week. Let's see what I got in my pocket here.
Oh, there they are. They're back.
Victory Mints.
Yes.
Now the big question is, how many mints come in a tin? Obviously, there's been 33 in there so far. But, when you get near the end of a tin, they start getting fractured and broken. I think there's like 3/4 of a mint left in there for the Bison. Therefore, they will have enough. 24-20. It's going to be a close game. It's going to come down to the fourth quarter, but I think the Bison will have just enough to pull out the win, and enough victory mint left.
To celebrate after the game.
Dom,
you want a couple of those?
Dom, these are all yours.
Oh, I appreciate that.
Yes.
They're back.
Where did you find those?
I love this.
I have my sources. You know, the supply had run low, but they're back.
Before we got to run real quick, but this was the first prop that was ever on the Bison pregame show. You gave me a heck about it. I know I picked Northern Iowa earlier. I can't pick NDSU until they lose.
Well, don't make preseason predictions, Dom, because you look so ridiculous right now.
I always look ridiculous. I got the Bison winning 21-17.
All right, UNI's offense just isn't good enough to win this game. 45% completion rate by, the quarterback.
Come on,
position.
Kolpack, pick UNI. Come on, do it.
He did last year.
I did last year. Just cannot do it. NDSU's defense is too good. They gave up 256 points on average last year, or total yards.
Points? Jeez. No wonder they don't
Total
win
yards.
games.
Same situation this year, 256.
Yeah.
I don't think things will change. I say NDSU 24-13.
Should be a fantastic game. Kickoff is at 4. Our live blog begins at 3 o'clock on Inforum.com. We'll be back after the game for complete highlights and reaction on our post-game show. For Eric Peterson and Jeff Kolpack, I'm Dom Izzo. That's the Media Blog pregame show, live here from Cedar Falls.